Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to take a look over the next couple of videos, actually, at some knives that I have picked up along the way that have probably more sentimental value than something, as opposed to something I'm likely to carry, right? So I'm probably not going to carry this knife or maybe even the next two that you see that I know of. I'm kind of moving into just sharing some of my sentimental collection right here. This, if you haven't already figured out, is clearly a Microtech. This was supposed to be a UTX-85, but I'm going to leave it at that for a minute. Those of you who know your Microtechs might spot something funny here. This is a replica knife. I should probably be clear about that. I did pick this up off of OK Knives. Again, just a little bit of a sentimental buy. It wasn't that much. It was about 33 bucks, and I thought, you know what, this is something cool that I probably need to have in my collection. I've had my eye on this for a very long time. So I was 8 years old back in 1977 when the first Star Wars movie came out. And I was always a sci-fi fan as a young boy. Probably a lot of us, I'm going to guess, on this video here. A lot of y'all are much the same way. But back in those days, the early 70s, they really didn't have hardly any sci-fi space kind of stuff on TV. I remember as a kid, 8 years old, 7 years old, I would watch the old Flash Gordon in black and white. That was from the 1950s, actually. So I want y'all, if anybody here remembers the black and white Flash Gordon from the 1950s or watched it as a kid in the 1970s, the reruns on Saturday afternoon after the cartoons are over, throw me a thumbs up down there and hit me up in the comments. I want to hear from y'all. I had a little bit of a nostalgia trip when I was kind of doing some prep for this video here. So it wasn't actually until the end of the 1970s before we got Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica. Any of y'all remember those? But nothing ever compared to that first Star Wars movie that I saw as a kid there. And then here's the thing. It wasn't until, I guess now, God, it's been 30 years almost. Oh, it's been more than that. Dadgummit, man, making me feel old today. Nobody knew what a Mandalorian was, right? When the first movie came out, there was Boba Fett. And I guess unless you were a super geek, I don't think we even acknowledged or recognized or knew that Boba Fett was a Mandalorian. So now here we are 30, 40 years later, and they've got this whole series episode. If you're a sci-fi geek like me, you're aware of it. I didn't even watch the whole series now as an adult, but I did watch a few of them. The little baby Yoda, the main character is the Mandalorian, right? That was the name of the whole show. Well, Boba Fett was a Mandalorian, and that is the Mandalorian signal or symbol right there, symbology. So anyhow, thought it was very cool. I knew when I first saw this knife that I would eventually need to go ahead and grab one and just keep it in the collection just for my own reminiscing memory purpose, right? So we're going to dive in, take a deeper look, and see what makes this, a pretty cool little knife to have. There's definitely some, some positives and negatives, as there are with all of these knives. So I'm going to share all that here in just a minute. Before we get too deep, if you haven't already, throw me a thumbs up down there in the bottom. If you're not a subscriber, we would love to have you join our little band of renegades here in the darker corners of the interwebs. So feel free to join along. We would love to have you. Show you the box it came in. Of course, you've probably been looking at this. This was, I guess, 25 years of innovation. So I have no idea, although I do have some idea when this came out. So to the best of my understanding and research, and I'm not a big Microtech or an OTF guy, right? You're going to realize that pretty soon in this video. But if you are, maybe y'all will know better. But it seems like the bounty hunter versions did not even come out till 2019. So here's one of the first interesting things about this knife here. We'll finish looking at the box in a second. Do you see that born on date right there? That is October of 2017, which, as much as I can tell, is 2 years before any of the bounty hunter knife series came out on any of the sizes. Anyhow, 25-year anniversary box. It did come with a, cool little Velcro pouch, I guess, that you could carry it in. I'm not going to use that, but it was cool of them. Little belt loop. It doesn't feel all that expensive or anything, but it does come with the absolute necessary item, which is this special tool for these stupid little triangle screws. So all these screws are little triangle head screws, and that's true to the original. So at least they were kind enough to stick this little tool in here, and I actually did have to tighten a couple of these up when it came. So there's all kinds of things that will tip a real person off to the fact that this knife is not a genuine artifact. And if you know the bounty hunter knives, you probably have already spotted it. I'll talk about it in just a minute. But those of you who know will clearly know that is not a real bounty hunter knife just by looking at it right here. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. All right, let's do some size comps before we get there. Have I even opened this knife yet? It is pretty snappy. We're going to talk about the action in just a minute, but let's open this thing up because it's always hard to get a sense. So the UTX-85 was supposed to be an 85% length of the Ultratech. Well, that didn't exactly work out in this knife. We're going to talk about that too in just a minute. There's all kinds of funny things going on here, but obviously we have a PM2 and a Para 3. This is much more lengthy, like the PM2, a little bit longer than the old PM2 there. How about, just because I have one handy, what do you call that thing right there? Holy cow, I just drew a total blank. The Manix 2 Lightweight, thank you very much. And we have Rocky Raccoon from 𝗏 right here. You can see our knife is much bigger than both of these. That's a fantastic, both of these are actually fantastic knives. For those of you who don't care for Spyderco as much, how about our Vision FG, which we always have in there. I'm not sure whether I should start it from the end of this glass breaker tip or from the butt end of the knife, and we'll get to that in the measurements too. This thing is bigger than all these, right? So Pyrite Light, in case you're wondering, and the Vision FG. So it's a pretty good sized knife. This is supposed to be 85% of the Ultratech. That doesn't work out. So I'm going to pull up a couple of pictures on the screen here. And on the left side, I'm going to show you what a UTX-85 looks like. And on the right side, or maybe below, it depends on the size, I'm going to show you what the Ultratech looks like, both in Bounty Hunter, right? And now you can see that how that compares to what I have here. Which one do you think I got here? So now I'm gonna pull up a picture of the listing of what I thought I was buying from the OK Knives site. It clearly says, as you can see, UTX-85, right? That's what the listing says. Nope, not what I got here, boys. So let's bring up the specs number one. This is where I started. So the specs for the UTX-85, I started going down the list, and I'm saying, well, wow, this thing is way off from the size, the open length, the closed length, the blade length. All that stuff just doesn't seem to be lining up. Something's just not right. So what they did was they sent me an Ultratech. So this is not a UTX-85, it's an Ultratech. So let's get rid of the UTX-85 specs and try that one more time with the Ultratech specs. And now you can see, now we're back into the ballpark again, although there's still some differences even in the size of this one, so I don't know what to make of all that. Full open, and it may just be the different blade styles. You know, these come in all these different blade styles. This is the Hellhound blade, by the way. I just kind of thought it was cool. But you can see mine comes in, depending on whether you're measuring, again, from either the butt of the knife or the tip of the, I guess, lanyard hole, which is the other side of the pocket clip, or the glass breaker tip. You get all kinds of different measurements, and none of those seem to match up with even what the Ultratech is supposed to be. The blade length on this is right at 3.5 inches, and the Ultratech is supposed to be 3.375, so it doesn't quite match up perfectly on that. I do get a pretty accurate close length. Again, it depends. If I'm measuring from the end of the knife, it's a little bit shorter, and from the glass breaker, it's a little bit longer. So you know, it is what it is. It's a replica, and I don't care because I didn't buy this really to be a perfect match for the original. Bead blast and stone finish. However, I do want to point out the finish on this side of this knife here. Let me see if maybe I can zoom in. You know, it never looks as good on my camera here as it does in the final product. Can you see how the angle of this vertical, I'm going to call it, it's almost like a hand rubbed kind of satin finish on the flats there. Can you see how that angles upwards? They just didn't, on this side, they got it pretty horizontal. Let me get that in the picture here. So that came in pretty good, but on this side, just no bueno. And, you know, it is what it is. I paid, what did I say, $33 for this thing? So the fact that it fires out consistently every time, I'm pretty cool with that. All right, let's keep going down the line here. The scales, the handle is obviously, not scales, but the handle, I guess, is all aluminum. This says it's a D2 steel and 58 to 59 HRC. I have no idea if that's true or not. I don't really have any reason to doubt it. I mean, it's not like you're bragging that you know your steel is a D2. And 58 to 59 is not exactly, you know, something to write home about either. So I would have to tend to believe, and OK's been pretty honest about most of the stuff we've done with them. So probably it is. Who knows? This comes in all different kinds of steels when you can get these. These are super hard to get, and they've done it in a bunch of different steels over the years. The one I'm comparing to was just an LMAX version. 3.5 ounces is the weight. That actually is pretty pocketable and carryable. It's a double action OTF. As you have figured out, I paid $32, $33 for this thing. If you can find one new, you can pay about $378, but these are almost impossible, especially the Hellhound. What I've realized now in doing my research after getting this one is that this blade style is the one to get, and some of these on the aftermarket are selling upwards of $800 to $900 right now. So incredibly popular and hard to find knife. You know, they can't keep them in stock when they put them out, and there's a very limited run of these that have come out over the years. I don't even know if they're even making new ones. Maybe somebody else out there will know that. All right, let's get into the old closer look portion of today's events. So if you know these knives, and again, you've probably been saying from the beginning, that is clearly not a real bounty hunter knife, because the real bounty hunter knife, maybe you noticed when I pulled up the images earlier, is all scuffed up. What they call it is the battle-worn finish, which is a fancy way of saying we scratch the hell out of your knife and we're going to pretend like that's a really cool thing that you want. So I think that battle-worn idea came because somebody dropped a box of them at the factory, but who am I to say? I have no idea, right? Anyhow, this is clearly not battle-worn, and this is my question for y'all. This is what I want some feedback on today, if y'all would be so kind. Should I scuff this up and make it battle-worn to match what the original ones really look like? I mean, like, I'm not going to sell it. I've already told you I only bought this for sentimental reasons. This is going to be always in my collection, and one of these days I look forward to sharing the story with my grandkids about how I was a young boy when I first learned of Boba Fett and the Mandalorians, and he's going to think maybe I'm some weirdo, but I'm going to enjoy that story, so y'all just stick with me. But would you scuff it up and make it look battle-worn, or do you leave it as, you know, kind of this clean, pristine finish? Let me know down in the comments. I'd really love to hear what you guys think. I truly am torn about what I should do in that regard, right? So let me know what you think. We already talked about the born on date being 2017. That's clearly not likely true. I'm good with all that. Again, you know, I don't care. It's just, you know, it's for me. It's for my benefit. Hardware check, we already said these little screws here, these little triangle screws are special deals. Did have a couple loosen up on me. You know, I haven't really used this knife in any particular way. Pocket clip, as you have noticed, is just a stamped steel clip. It is pretty true to the original styles of what you'd find on the original. It is not comfortable at all. It's certainly easy in and out of the pocket, and the you know, the springiness is dead on, I would say. You know, if I had to carry it, I think it goes easy in and out of the pocket, no worries. 3.5 ounces, no problem in terms of carryability, but that pocket clip is going to get sore. I mean, it definitely sticks up and pokes you in the hand, so nothing to write about there. The other thing I will notice, the real ones have yellow paint underneath this pocket clip tab on the backside, and this one obviously does not. It does have this little tiny lanyard hole from my buddy John. I think they did that for you. It's not comfortable. It's just, it is what it is. Aluminum body. You know, it's not bad. It could be worse, but, you know, this is not made to be like, you know, a real comfortable knife to use, right? This is fun, and it is what it is. Let's talk about this, a button, for a minute, because this is what actually, it kind of surprised me. You know, there are some things that surprise me in a good way. This is clearly a metal button. I'm going to guess it's aluminum. That would be, I think, a pretty safe bet. But the cuts that they did on this is a pretty sharp little button right here. Like, these are very cleanly cut, you know, precision ground. This is as sticky friction. You're not going to slip off of that right there. It's almost to the point where that's almost kind of sharp. And I'll tell you, in opening and closing, if you wanted to just sit and do this all day long, your thumb is going to get sore after a while. And it's not going to take too long before it does get sore. I can tell you that. Because it's just tough. You know, now maybe if you had man hands with some real calluses on them, you might be okay, and it might be just fine. You know, I'm not dying or anything, but, you know, probably after 20 or 30 openings, you're probably ready to give your thumb a break from that button. But the upside to that is they did a quality job of grinding it out. And this thing has never misfired. It's worth pointing out as well. Has never missed a beat. Fires pretty solidly as far as I can tell. I don't really know how to judge these, right? I mean, it fires out pretty hard and consistently. The one thing I would note that it caught me off guard as well, because again, I'm not really an OTF guy. It takes a lot of pressure to get this button, and you can push it all the way up to here before it fires. It's only this last little bit of travel where that thing will come out. Comes out nice and fast and hard. I'm going to guess the pressure needed is going to be in the 15 to 20 pounds. You know, that's just from the old pew-pew trigger finger that knows what, you know, a typical 5-pound pull might feel like. Those of you out there who understand will know. And this is at least 3 to 4 times the amount of pressure. It takes a good bit of pressure. You can see my thumb tip getting white. It takes a lot of pressure to fire that thing and to retrieve it back in. Again, I'm going to guess it's at least 15, 20 pounds. Maybe that's normal. I think that is kind of normal. So it is what it is. Let's talk about the blade real quick. Again, this is the Hellhound. I figured why not? And I didn't know it was the most popular, and it's pretty cool, and I'm pretty happy with it. Looks pretty badass. You know, if you're going to get a switchblade and out the front, why not get one that looks pretty badass? Stonewashed, obviously, on the grind lines with satin finish. We already talked about that. Kind of off kilter there a little bit. D2 steel, you know, who knows? Don't care. It's going to be great for me. There is some blade jimping out here. I guess, yeah, if you were going to use it and you could use it like that, that certainly would be fine and dandy. It would work just fine. There's a little bit of jimping down here on the bottom. I wouldn't trust this to hold my finger from sliding off, so you're not going to be doing any heavy, like push cutting kind of stuff where that finger might just slide on up to the blade there. But there is a little jimping across the bottom here. All good. There you go. No branding anywhere on these except the pocket clip, as we've already noticed. Maybe that's normal. I don't know. Y'all can let me know in the comments if you are a Microtech expert. All good. Let's talk about the blade wobble. That's always the other thing. And so let me see what the best way I can demonstrate this is. I'm going to try to hold this knife perfectly still as I can, and show you back and forth. So there's a little bit here, right? It's not terrible. My understanding is for OTFs, that's pretty normal. So up and down, there's a little bit of blade rock, but side to side, there's a tiny amount as well. Okay, do you see that? I'm trying to hold this as still as I can. There's a little side to side and a little bit of up and down on this thing. I think that's normal. You know, it is what it is. Y'all let me know down in the comments if y'all have these for real and y'all's does the same thing. That just, I know they have just come out with a zero blade play, I think, ZBP, zero blade play, something like that, that they've somehow now finally, after all these years, figured out how to make a blade that an OTF that doesn't wobble. So again, this is perfectly normal, but that can be a little disconcerting if you're not an expert on that, right? There's a little bit of a tiny sharpening choil. However, that thing is so fat right there, so fast, you're going to have a hard time sharpening anything. You know, they made an effort, good for them, but after one sharpening, maybe you're done. I'm probably never going to sharpen this knife because, again, I'm not really using it. This is for just my own personal fun, as we already talked about. But if you had to, and you were interested in one that you might want to carry and use, let's talk about the sharpness. Not bad. So it's not great. This is factory. I don't even know that I've stropped this thing. I'm going to call that about an 8. It's not, no hang-ups, no snags, no blade nicks or anything like that. Even the front is okay. Of course, you can see that was pretty bad. But the tanto, the rounded off part, not bad. Sharp enough. Certainly would get most jobs done, but definitely nothing to write home about. Again, I'm going to give it an 8 on the redneck sharpness scale. Ergonomically, again, just okay. It's a big square brick with a crappy pokey pocket clips. Fairly light, certainly easy enough to carry. It does take a lot of pressure to get that thing to fire, which is great. That means most kids probably are not going to be able to pick this thing up and use it. It does have the old safety mechanism, so if you try to fire it into something, you know, it's probably going to poke a little tiny hole in you, but it's not going to go all the way through you. You can see, as all do, this one will disengage. If it runs into anything on the way out, you just pull it back out like that. It is now, once again, back into play again. So if you want to see that, oh, God, I can hardly even get this thing closed now. My thumb's giving out on me. Again, one more time, even up close. You can see there's hardly any damage to that paper. Didn't really even puncture into, you know, that piece of paper. So all good there. All right, let's bring this thing home. Negatives, funky screws. If you lose that tool, you are absolutely screwed. Mine is not the battle worn edition. Y'all can let me know if you think I should make it battle worn. Crappy finish on the satin flats on this thing. You know, only a knife nerd like me is going to notice that, let alone care about it or think it's not the way it should be. A lot of, you know, fair amount of blade wobble in play. I've had some others that had actually worse, so I think that's pretty much par for the course when you get all that when you get one of these. All that being said, don't care. I love it because it's, again, sentimental. You know, this is like the ugly stick figure drawings that our kids or grandkids draw for us, and we put them up on the fridge and maybe even frame them like a Picasso, because to us, it's the most beautiful thing in the world because of the sentimental attachment to it. I don't think I'd want to spend $800 on one of these things, but for $33, man, I'm down for that all day long. So again, let me know in the comments, should I make this thing battle worn, scuff the heck out of it? Do you have any particular suggestions on how I would do that? Just some sandpaper around the edges, you know, careful or not so careful? Don't know, but let me know if y'all have any particular tips or tricks on that. Don't forget, I got a website. I would love to have you there. If you get the time, you can binge watch all my videos and find all the links to all the knives that I review on this channel. That is at bladesonabudget.com. Go hit me up there. Otherwise, throw me a thumbs up if you're still hanging around. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much. If you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to do that too. We'd love to have you. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys, and we will see you on the next video. Y'all have a great day.